How's it going, ladies and birds? I'm a probiotic milk drink.
I didn't know we were doing a bit.
And welcome to Screen Cheeks. Today we're reviewing a movie called Lady Bird. With us, I'd like to introduce our new co-host. This is Trouble.
She's a ladybird.
She is herself a ladybird. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Trouble. So let's talk about Lady Bird. Lady Bird is the directorial debut of Greta Gerwig, the star of Frances Ha, a movie that we didn't see because we both agreed it didn't sound very funny. So, was it good? Was it bad?
Good. Amazing.
I agree. Lady Bird was I don't want to say it was a surprise. I mean, I think it looked really, really good from the trailers, but
I was surprised. I would say I wasn't surprised by the quality, but by the amount of heart that went into the movie.
Yeah, I would say based by the subject matter, how much raw emotion they're able to bring out of the material.
Yeah.
So, Lady Bird, what is it about?
Lady Bird is the story of a girl who has called herself Lady Bird, who is just going through your normal teenage tribulations, boys and school, and not feeling like she has a place, struggling with her identity, struggling with her mom, her relationship with her mom. Her parents are going through some struggles. Her dad has lost his job. Her mom works really hard, and they're just constantly butting heads, those two. It's kind of the premise of the movie. I think that we went into it thinking it was going to be the story of a mother-daughter relationship, and it was in part, but the majority of the movie is just, it's a coming-of-age story, and realizing that your place in the world is exactly where you don't want it to be, and sometimes that's okay.
Yeah. The main strength of this film is the authenticity of its characters and its dialogue. Just about every character in this movie is extremely believable.
Yes.
And also likable in their own quirky way.
And also dislikable in their own ways. They're very well-rounded in the way that you have moments where you dislike them, but you love them still somehow, and it's all okay. They're very believable, well-rounded characters.
Talk about like all these characters feel like not like they're based on fictional tropes, but based on real life tropes.
You know a character, like every single character in this movie.
Yeah, there's someone you can relate each and every character to in this movie in your life, and that's I think the main strength of this movie is that a lot of the scenes will bring back memories, I imagine, for a vast majority of people. Doesn't matter how old you are.
How long it's been since you were in high school, I don't think that matters.
If you even went to high school.
If you're, a parent of teenagers, you'll probably relate to this movie a lot. If you're a teenager, you'll relate to this movie. If you were a teenager ever, you'll relate to this movie. It's just a really good movie, really believable film.
Fantastic. Stand out for me was Laurie Metcalf as Lady Bird's mother. I think she did a fantastic job. She does sort of like a dual performance where she's both an overbearing mother but also a very loving mother. So that way I think that there's something that every audience member can really take from that relationship that she has with her teenage daughter.
My standout was Saoirse Ronan for sure. So I've always seen the potential in her to do great things as far as being an actress goes ever since she was little, when we watched her in The Lovely Bones. I've always seen really great potential in her, and this movie is where that really, really shined through. Hear me out here. So Daniel Day-Lewis acts with his whole face, especially his eyes, and Saoirse Ronan can do the same thing. She really can.
Well,
she draws a lot of emotion from her eyes.
Going on this. I've only seen her in The Fucking Host.
And that movie, she did amazing in. That was a really awesome movie for her. It just wasn't a good movie in general. But she stood out to me, especially as being somebody who has been in acting since she was a young girl, probably didn't get a very traditional high school experience, and most definitely did not get a traditional American high school experience, and yet she was able to pull this movie off flawlessly. I believe that she blew me out of the water with this one, and I hope we see more of her.
She really nailed down it's all in the body language.
Absolutely.
And she developed almost like little ticks for this character.
Yeah.
That were very believable. Just the way that she would move her shoulders, or that she was a little more frantic and fast moving than the other characters, and just very subtle ways came off as very believable. So, Lady Bird, Greta Gerwig, fantastic job. Thank you so much for this movie.
I have rarely seen movies. This is the only one that's coming readily to mind where the side characters make as much of an impact on me as the main characters. Like, sometimes there'll be a side character that I appreciate, but
there's a lot of characters in this movie, but not one of them is out of place. Really, everyone in this movie, and I think this is a real strength of Saoirse Ronan as well, as everyone played off this movie so naturally. I don't think there was anything that, when it came on screen, I didn't want to see it. You know what I mean? There was no canto bite sequence of this movie. Every character belonged. Every scene belonged. And the movie moves really quickly, but it covers so much ground so efficiently. This is just a really well put together movie. It's fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
Lady Bird, overall, I'm going to say, I'm going to count it through, give it our score.
Yep.
Here we go. 1, 2, 3,
9.5.
9.5.
Yeah,
Fuck.
I'm going 0.5. Yes, sir.
I think for a directorial debut, this is extremely impressive. Greta Gerwig's got a great career ahead of her.
Mm-hmm.
And so does Saoirse Ronan. Thanks, Saoirse Ronan. I thought you were just going to be like a Shailene Woodley piece of shit, but you're actually great.
Shailene Woodley isn't a piece of shit.
Well,
I don't like her, but we don't need to call her a piece of shit on camera.
Sorry, Shailene Woodley. You've done nothing wrong.
All right.
But you're no J-Law. Welcome back to Screen Cheeks, where...
We don't need to say that because we're editing into the same video. Gerald's game.
Is this really what it takes these days?
God, how did we go so wrong? We were happy once, weren't we?
Gerald? What? What's happening?
Oh.
Gerald!
Netflix's Stephen King's Gerald's Game.
Netflix's Stephen King's Gerald's Game is quite the movie.
Watched it on a whim. I think we were expecting a bit of a laugh, and we didn't get one.
In a good way.
In a good way. Gerald's Game is about a married couple where things have kind of died down as far as the flame goes, and they go to this remote lakeside cabin to try to spice things up. Gerald, the husband, decides to handcuff his wife to the bed. They get into a bit of an argument, and he has a heart attack and dies with her handcuffed to the bed and no way to escape. And basically what happens next is wild.
So for an incredibly stupid premise that takes place in only one set, this movie does it expertly.
Yes.
It's directed by Mike Flanagan, who did Oculus, which is a little bit of a rough around the edges horror movie that came out a few years ago, but
not bad.
It's great. When it first came out, I loved it. I know you weren't a big fan of it, but
I just think it's a little too on the nose, but that's for another review. Maybe we'll go back and review some of his other movies some other time. I was quite impressed with Gerald's Game because the majority of the movie takes place in 2 locations. That's it. The lakeside cabin presently where she's handcuffed to the bed, and a lakeside cabin as a child with her family. And the movie never once feels boring. I would say I was invested in the movie from start to finish, and the character, who's played by whomst.
Carla Gerigliano?
Yeah, that sounds right to me. Oh, you were right. That's pretty much about how it's pronounced.
Carla Gugino? Carlisle Gigliano?
Regardless, her name's Carla. No idea how to pronounce her last name. Her performance was pretty good. So here's the problem. My problem with Gerald's Game is Stephen King. I think that Flanagan did an incredible job of staying true to the source material. And that was the biggest detriment of this movie. Gerald's Game at times is just over the top. The characters' lines are very campy. enforced, and that's in the book. And Flanagan did a really good job of translating that into the movie perfectly. So a lot of the times the interactions between characters feels a little made for Lifetime movie. And then some of the events that take place at the end of the movie, and we're not going to spoil that, because that's incredible, and it's very divisive. The ending of this movie, it also was a very divisive book at the time, because the movie or the book wraps up really nicely, and then there's an epilogue.
When you see the epilogue in the movie, it's sort of presented as the ending, whereas in the context of it just being an epilogue, it's fine as something being tacked on to the end of the film, but the film equivalent of an epilogue is a post-credit scene. I think if they had done the ending of this movie as a post-credit scene, it wouldn't have felt as jarring or strange.
There were parts of the scene that I really did enjoy, though. We come to find out some really sad things about this character as she's growing up with her dad. And this last scene really wraps up that storyline, as well as the storyline with her husband. And there's a really strong line delivered there at the end, but just the rest of the context of that scene was really out of place for me and unnecessary. But that's not the fault of the film.
No,
we need to make that clear.
The unfortunate thing about the ending is that is literally the only place you could put all that information, because you would need the events of the story to wrap before you could even begin to present something like the ending of this film. So again, if it was maybe a post-credit scene, I don't think it would have been a bigger deal. But yeah, it kind of comes after the actual resolution to the events of the film. Again, no spoilerino.
No.
But that resolution is just fine of an ending, and then it just kind of keeps going. So I think that, for me, I don't think it's stupid. I just think that where it is located in the movie is a little strange.
So here's the hard question, and this is a question I'm having a hard time answering, but what would you give this movie out of 10?
Considering I'm not a big Stephen King fan, I think the vast majority of his film adaptations, I should say, that work usually is due to the director. Bringing it up, a big example being The Shining, where
reboot.
That was really Jack Nicholson and Stanley Kubrick who really elevated the source material, where the story itself is just kind of strange.
That's where I'm having a hard time rating this movie, because my only flaws in this whole movie are based on the source material. I thought that the camera shots were incredible. I thought that the
camera is very dynamic in this movie. It makes great use of this space.
I think even taking into account that I'm going to try not to judge the storyline, because it's not the director's fault or the actor's fault, I would still only be able to give this movie a 6.5 in good conscience. And that's not bad. I would recommend you watch it.
I would say 7 with a strong recommendation for horror fans. If you're a Stephen King fan, you're probably going to rate this movie really high. This is one of his best film adaptations.
Or even if you're just a fan of thrillers, because there was very little horror aspects of this movie. A couple, but they weren't really.
This movie has a lot of aspects of drama.
Just survival. Just a survival story. If you like stories of survival, if you like really strong female leads with really solid, well-rounded storylines and a redemption arc, then you're going to like this movie. So, I don't know. Maybe
it's very unique. If you've never read the book, this is something that you've really never seen before, and this is executed very well.
I think I would have been sitting at a 7 as well, except that half a point difference comes down to special effects, not where the gore is concerned, but where there's a certain character in the movie whose effects were not great, and it was very noticeable, and it was off-putting for me. It looked very much like a mask you could buy at Halloween City with glow-in-the-dark eyes. It was just it was bad. And that's where it lost half the point for me, because that character ends up being a bigger part than you think.
It starts out almost allegorical, or what you think it is, but it develops into something else that I don't want to cover.
Right. I just think that was also another detriment to the movie that was not, again, the fault of the directors or the actors. It was
It's
the
just
fault of Stephen King.
Stephen King being a fucking weirdo.
We talked about in our last review with Ghost Story how we felt offended as viewers that he didn't think we would understand his metaphors, so he had somebody come in and explain his metaphors to us. I felt like Stephen King didn't understand his own metaphors, and like he didn't know that he was being
had to
very
explain it to himself.
He had to he had to say, you know what, we need to explain this, and he chose to do it in a really terrible way. But yeah, Gerald's Game. Watch it. It's on Netflix. If you have Netflix, there's no harm in giving it a shot. I think that it was a very strong film, and I don't know. I think that this is a great time for Stephen King adaptations, and there's a couple of movies that I would like to see remade, and there's a couple of movies that I'd like to see made in general, and Gerald's Game was a good place to start. I'm really pleased.
It's been a Stephen King couple of years.
Yeah.
Here's to a couple more.
Smoky Smokies.
Overall, Lady Bird, I would give it...
And chicken nuggets? Like chicken nuggets?
Chicken nugget. Chicken nugget.
Pretty bird, pretty. Is it pretty bird? Who's a pretty bird?
Pretty good.
Who's a pretty bird?
Pretty.
I don't know. Why isn't it a 10?
I would say, for my... Like a
Okay.
9. A 9 is a technically, objectively great... is an objectively great movie with very little flaws that I think everyone should see. A 9 for me is something that is a technically, objectively fantastic film that everyone... Shut up.